Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Kara Kumari. I'm Assistant Commissioner for Communications and External Affairs. It is 3 o'clock on the dot, and we have a lot of information to get through. And I know we already have some questions coming into the chat box, and we want to try to make it through as much as we can in the time we have allotted. So we're going to start right on time. You're here because you're interested in learning more about the Katie Beckett program. We're very excited that we will start accepting applications a week from today, and we'll have a little bit more about that as well. But the first way I always want to start things off is I want to introduce my boss, Commissioner Brad Turner, to all of you. He is going to say a few words. He is the Commissioner of the Department of Intellectual and Developmental Disabilities, and it's also important that he's also the parent of a 13-year-old with intellectual and developmental disabilities who lives at home and is taken care of by him and his wife. Commissioner Turner, would you like to start off and say a few words?
Yeah, thank you, Kara, and good afternoon, everyone. I certainly appreciate you taking some time out of what I know is a busy and challenging schedule to join us. I am very excited about the Katie Beckett waiver. If any of you had the chance earlier in the week to watch me in our budget presentation, I mentioned to Governor Lee that the Katie Beckett waiver inside Tennessee will be a life changer for families and will save marriages, it will save children, and it's the right thing to do for Tennessee. And I know he's very excited about that, and he is certainly looking forward to us being able to share the types of success stories that can come from a program like the Katie Beckett waiver. So I want you to know, as Kara just laid out, that first and foremost, I'm the parent of a daughter named Kinsley, who is 13 years old and has intellectual developmental disabilities. Above all else, no matter how long I'm in this role, I'm always going to be Kinsley's dad. And as a result of that, these types of programs are really important to me, that there's longevity there and that there's opportunities for us to continue to figure out ways that we meet the needs for Tennesseans and families with children with disabilities. And that's what I promise you that we're going to do. My coworker, Patty Killingsworth, is on here, and she's going to be speaking a little bit later. Patty, too, comes from the same background as a parent of a child with disability. So you have some stakeholders at the state level that are very much invested in making sure that the Katie Beckett waiver does its best to meet the needs of you and meet the needs of your child and families all across the state of Tennessee. So with that, I want to make sure that I honor our time. I want to say thank you for joining. I promise you that we're going to work hard and we're going to make you proud. And I want to turn this back to Kara as we begin the presentation. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much, Commissioner, for joining us today. And of course, we all know that your heart is always with Kinsley, and you're a dad first and Commissioner second. Some of the other people we'll have over the course of the next hour that will be talking, I already introduced myself. We'll have Timothy Hickman. He is our Deputy Director of Intake and Case Management, and he is on the DIDD side in charge of leading the Katie Beckett program for us. In addition, as Commissioner mentioned, we have joining us Patty Killingsworth, Assistant Commissioner and Chief of Long-Term Services and Supports for TennCare. As he mentioned, she is also the parent of a child who has lifelong developmental disabilities and medical needs. So the two people who lead the department's efforts, not only DIDD's efforts, but also TennCare's efforts on this program, both know the tremendous blessing of a child with disabilities, but also the challenges that are presented by caring for a child with disabilities at home. Over the course of the next hour, we are going to go through a couple of things during this presentation. First, we're going to have an overview of the Katie Beckett program. We'll also have details about the programs, Part A, Part B, and also Part C. A lot of times you hear a lot about Part A and Part B, but there is also a Part C we'll go through as well. We'll go through steps on how to apply, and then finally, we'll talk about the next steps. What happens after you submit that self-referral form? What will that process look like? So first, we're going to start with an overview of the Katie Beckett program. So the Katie Beckett program is for children to get care for their disability or medical needs, even if their parents' income is higher than what Medicaid usually allows. And it's important because what we want to do is allow families to care for their children in their own homes rather than have them have care in a hospital or an institution. The Katie Beckett program actually dates back across the country dates back to the 1980s. It's named after a child, Katie Beckett, whose parents advocated for this option so that Katie Beckett, that child, would be able to receive care at home, even if that family did not financially qualify for Medicaid. Many of you are probably already aware that back in it says 2018, but it was actually 2019, Tennessee passed legislation to create a new standalone Katie Beckett program. And it was signed into law by Governor Lee back in 2019. I think May 25th or 26th was the exact date. It's important to note that families advocated for this program. They were on the front lines on Capitol Hill down here in Nashville, advocating for this program, telling lawmakers why it was important. And because of this new law, Tennessee now has funding to provide a Katie Beckett option for 3,000 families across Tennessee. So in Tennessee, what will this Katie Beckett program look like? So here in the state, the Katie Beckett program will serve children who are younger than the age of 18, and those children will have complex medical needs or disabilities. It's important to note that the Katie Beckett program is for children who are not eligible for Medicaid because their parents have too much money, which means they have too much income or assets. Generally, for folks to be eligible for Medicaid, usually a family is not allowed to have more than $2,000 in assets, and those income limits depend on a child's age and how many people live in the home. Also, when it comes to eligibility, Katie Beckett eligibility is determined in part by what's called a pre-admission evaluation. We call it sometimes a PAE, and yes, there's a lot of alphabet soup sometimes in government services. This is a medical review, and one of the reasons that we do this is it helps the state figure out what level of care your child needs from the Katie Beckett program, and we're going to talk more about that in a little while. Those levels of care are based on a thorough review of the child's medical needs, their behavioral health needs, and also their functional needs. So we're not just looking at one type of need, but rather a spectrum of different needs that a child may have. When we're talking about the Katie Beckett program, there are two levels of care for Katie Beckett. First is the institutional level of care, and this is for children who would qualify to receive medical care in a medical institution. So children who would be eligible to receive care in a hospital, a nursing home, or what's called an intermediate care facility for individuals with intellectual disabilities. They could receive that care in that place, but they want to receive that care at home. So that is institutional level of care. Then there's also at-risk level of care. And this is for children who don't qualify to receive care in a medical institution, but are at risk of needing institutional care unless they are able to get that care at home. And we'll talk a little bit more about that institutional and at-risk level of care going forward. So prior to the passage of this Katie Beckett law, DIDD and TennCare needed to create a new level of care rules just for children here in the state of Tennessee. And this was something that we knew that we needed to get many opinions on. So we got input from what we're calling a technical advisory group. This group consisted of several people. First, it consisted of parents of children with complex medical needs and disabilities. Many of the parents who sat on this technical advisory group were on the front lines of advocating for this law in the state legislature at the end of 2018 as well as early 2019. Also, doctors who take care of children with complex medical needs, doctors who had specialty in rare genetic disorders, as well as complex care for children with very complex medical needs. And then finally, we also had advocates for children with complex medical needs and disabilities and their families. So when we're talking about Tennessee's levels of care for Katie Beckett, we talked about there was institutional care and then there was at-risk care. Institutional level of care is what will qualify a child for Part A or Part C of the Katie Beckett program. And these are children with the most complex needs. When we look at this, there are two tiers of institutional level of care. The first is for the highest assessed needs. So those who have the most complex needs would be in Tier 1. And those complex needs can be based on medical and behavioral support needs. And this level 1 institutional level of care will be given priority for enrollment. Then there's Tier 2 institutional level of care. And these are needs where it's not as high as Tier 1, but it still meets institutional level of care. And tier 2 can be based on medical, behavioral, or functional support needs. One of the things that we were challenged to do when coming up with levels of care was to make sure that the funding we had for Part A and the slots we had for Part A were targeted towards those with the most significant and complex disabilities and or medical needs. And this is how we decided, and this is how we formed those tiers to make sure that we were doing what the law asked us to do, which was really ensure that those children were able to receive care. Then there is at-risk care, like we talked about, and that is what will qualify a person for Part B of the Katie Beckett program. Okay, so there are a lot of details as to what goes into Tier 1 and Tier 2, and there are many more slides about this. Because of the fact that we only have a limited amount of time and it is a large amount of information, we have actually got those slides separated out, and I'm going to just toggle off my screen for a second and bring up these slides here. I want to just mention that we have them. There's about 16 slides here. These are already on the DIDD and TennCare website, and if you are on the interest list, after this tomorrow morning, we will be sending out these slides as well as the PowerPoint that I'm reading off of right now. So back to this. Also, there is a very comprehensive Katie Beckett level of care guide. It is a very long, lengthy document that is also and already on the TennCare and DIDD Katie Beckett pages. You can see the information to get to those pages, and towards the end of this presentation, I'll toggle over to that DIDD website just to show everyone some of the resources that are on there. So now we're going to go a little bit more into the program design, Part A, Part B, and Part C. So as I mentioned, in Tennessee, the new law creates different ways to get services through Katie Beckett. We talked about Part A, the part where the law asks us to serve the folks who have the most complex medical needs or significant disabilities. And this would allow for up to 300 children to get Medicaid. Then there's Part B, and this will allow for up to 2,700 children to get help through DIDD. Finally, there's Part C, and this is for children who are already on Medicaid, and they would be able to keep their coverage that they currently have, even if their parents' income or assets increase, if they qualify for a Part A slot, but there is not a slot available for them. We'll get into a little bit more to what we mean when we talk about that in just a second. First, we're going to go through Part A. Part A is for children with the most significant disabilities or complex medical needs, as we've talked about. These are the children that would meet that institutional level of care. So they would qualify to receive care in a medical institution, but want to receive that care at home. And as we mentioned before, this level of need is determined by a medical review called a pre-admission evaluation, or PAE. So, special qualifications for Part A. What are those special qualifications for Part A? First of all, the child must meet institutional level of care based on that PAE. Also, the child's doctor must certify that the child's needs can be safely met at home. Also, the amount that TennCare would pay for the child's care at home can't be more than what it would cost to provide their care in an institution. Also, the child must have and keep private insurance. Now, this is the insurance, when we're talking about private insurance, this is the insurance that their parents get from their job or buy separately. If a family has insurance through their employer, they must keep that private insurance, or they must buy insurance separately. If the child doesn't have private insurance when they apply, TennCare will allow the child to enroll and wait for the next open enrollment period to buy insurance. And if the child doesn't have private insurance and doesn't get it by January 15th of the following year, they won't qualify for Part A anymore. This was something that really was important, and that lawmakers wrote into the law about the need for families to have private insurance. One thing that you'll see on this slide is that a hardship waiver may be available for some families. If a child applying for Katie Beckett doesn't have private insurance, the family can ask for a hardship exception to not have to buy private insurance if one of these things is true. Here are the things. The cost of private health insurance for the child is more than 5% of their parent's income. The parent's employer doesn't offer insurance, and the family's income is less than 400% of federal poverty level. And this is because the family won't qualify for premium assistance to help buy insurance on the federal marketplace. It's important to note that the hardship exception is only available when a child first applies and doesn't already have private insurance. So if TennCare decides the child qualifies for the exception, the family will still have to buy private insurance for the child, but TennCare will help pay for that child's part of the insurance. Also, another part of the law is that the family might have to pay a premium depending on their income. So this is another important thing that is a special to Part A. Parents must pay a monthly premium for Part A if their income is more than 150% of the federal poverty level. And the amount of that premium is dependent on that family's income. Also, and it's important to note, there are a couple of things that will happen. The amount that parent pays for a premium will have deducted from it the child's portion of private insurance. I realize I've just said a lot of words, but it's important to note, and I'll show you all where it is. You can find examples of how exactly this would work on the DIDD and TennCare Katie Beckett websites. Also, it's important to note that the first month of the premium must be paid before the child can be enrolled in Part A. And families will continue to pay those monthly premiums through automatic bank draft. If a family doesn't pay the Part A premiums, a child will be disenrolled from the program. So how that works is if the premium payment is more than 30 days late, a child will stop getting services until it's paid. So if that payment is late, at first a child will stop getting services. If the premium payment is more than 60 days late, that child will be disenrolled from the program. And a notice will be sent before either of these things happen, so a family can appeal if they think there's been a mistake. Also important to note that even if you qualify, there must be an open program slot for your child to enroll. Also important to note, for the first year, only children who meet the highest needs for institutional level of care, so that Tier 1 level of care, will be enrolled in Part A. And the reason for this is this will help make sure that children with the most complex needs are enrolled in Part A. So when we talk about Part A, we'll go over a little bit about what services and supports will look like in Part A. Children in Part A will receive full Medicaid benefits such as home health care services, in-home nursing services, medical equipment and supplies, occupational therapy, physical therapy, and speech therapy, audiological services, and non-emergency medical transportation. It's important also that these services must be medically necessary, and then also private insurance must pay first. So if something can be covered first by the child's private insurance, that is who will pay for these services. TennCare will help pay for those things that the private insurance doesn't cover, including copays. So private insurance will always be the first person. If it is covered by private insurance, it will be paid by private insurance. The TennCare services will come in on the back end to pay for the things that the private insurance will not cover. Also, children in Part A can receive up to $15,000 a year in home and community-based services to help pay for things insurance usually doesn't cover. These are sometimes called wraparound services. Oftentimes, these are non-medical services that really help support a family to take care of a child at home. And we'll take a look at what some of those things are. Respite or supportive home care is one of those things that's considered a home and community-based service. And that type of care can be provided either through a provider agency or done through what's called consumer direction. Transportation, assistive technology, adaptive equipment and supplies, minor home modifications, community integration support services, family caregiver education and training, decision-making supports, family-to-family support, community support development, organization and navigation, and health insurance counseling and forms assistance. And as we're sending out these slides, you can take a look at all of those, but these are some of the things that are considered home and community-based services. And each child enrolled in Part A can have up to $15,000 a year in these services. Also important, children in Part A will have what's called TennCare Select for their health plan. This is managed by Blue Care, and this is a special managed care organization that will give each child a nurse care manager through TennCare Select that will help write a plan for the care of each child's needs. And these nurse care managers have received special training in providing services and supports to those with developmental disabilities. That nurse care manager will meet with the family at least quarterly to help the family with services, monthly, as you can see, for children who meet Tier 1 level of care. And the nurse care manager will also help as needed in between meetings. So that is an overview of Part A of the program. Now we'll go into Part B. Part B is for children with complex medical needs and disabilities who do not qualify for care at a medical institution or are waiting for a slot in Part A. In order to qualify for Part B, the child meets the at-risk level of care, or they meet that institutional level of care and other qualifications for Part A, but they're waiting for a program slot to become available in Part A. Children in Part B are enrolled on a first-come, first-served basis. So this is based on when you apply and are placed on the Part B waiting list. So this will operate on a first-come, first-served basis for Part B services, as opposed to the level of care and prioritization for Part A. Children in Part B will not be enrolled in Medicaid, meaning they will not have those traditional Medicaid medical services, but they will get help from DIDD to pay for up to $10,000 a year in care for their child. When we're talking about what this program is in the informal documents, it's oftentimes referred to as a Medicaid diversion program. Some examples of things that Part B will cover. And one of the things that we really looked to do in Part B was offer flexibility so that families could utilize the funds that they have in a way that would make the most impact in their child's life and in their child's care. So some of the different ways that families can look to use Part B is to pay the cost of the child's private insurance. So if families would like to use some of that funding in Part B to pay for their child's private insurance, that is one way they can do it. They can also pay for the care the child's private insurance doesn't cover or only pays for part of. And this can include a healthcare account to pay for some of these costs as they happen. And it also can include getting paid back for things that you can't purchase with the healthcare account. Another thing that families can choose in Part B is home and community-based services similar to those that were listed in Part A. So for some of these services like respite or supportive home care, you can hire the person who gives the care, or you can choose a community provider. When we talked about consumer direction, that's what that is when you yourself make hiring decisions as to who you want to provide that care, or you can utilize a provider agency to help you make those decisions and hire those folks. As you can see, this list is very similar to the other list in Part A, so I won't go through all of these again. Important to note that in Part B, it's up to $10,000 a year. And a DIDD case manager will help children who have services in Part B. So that case manager will help navigate, help that family navigate their funds. They'll help you write a plan for the care your child needs. So they will help write that support plan. In addition, they will help you manage that $10,000 budget for those Part B services. So they'll help you decide what that budget might look like and the different services that are available. So they can help you understand which services can and cannot be paid for with the healthcare account card and which services you're going to have to pay first to get reimbursed for. And finally, they can help you if your child's needs increase and you think you might qualify for Part A. So we've talked about Part A and Part B. Now we'll talk a little bit about Part C. This was something that came from feedback from parents. When we first, after this law first passed, we held meetings across the state, 3 stakeholder meetings, and also solicited input on an online forum, as well as received comments and had a phone call with families as well. And one of the things we heard was, don't punish my child. I've done what's necessary to have my child on Medicaid services now. Don't punish that child if my needs change. So we decided to add a Part C. Part C allows children who are already on Medicaid to keep their coverage even if their parents' income or assets increase. So this is called informal Medicaid documents, and you may hear these words, which is why we're discussing them right now. It's called continued eligibility or continued coverage. Part C is for children who are already on Medicaid, but are losing Medicaid because their income or assets have increased. So some of the examples of that are a family's income goes up and down seasonally, or one parent is offered a promotion. Those are just examples of ways that income could increase, assets could increase either throughout the year or even, you know, one day a parent might get a promotion and have a pay raise, and they should not take that promotion because they're worried about their child's Medicaid eligibility. The child meets most of the criteria for Part A, including institutional level of care, and these are the special qualifications for Part C. And the amount that TennCare would pay for the child's care at home can't be more than it would cost to provide care in an institution. So those are the 2 things that they would meet most of that criteria for Part A. Important though, in Part C, the child does not have to purchase private insurance or pay premiums for Part C because they already have Medicaid. So other qualifications for Part C is the child would be enrolled in Part A, but there is not an open slot for the child. So this is if we do not have an open slot for that child can continue to be in what's called Medicaid Part C. The child will be on the waiting list for Part A while they're enrolled in Part C, and if a slot opens up in Part A, they'll move to Part A. They will not be able to stay in Part C. Children who qualify to stay on Medicaid in Part C will keep TennCare Medicaid benefits for children. So they'll have access to all of those Medicaid benefits that they would have currently right now on Medicaid. What they will not have is those wraparound home and community-based services that are available to children who are enrolled in Part A. So we've gone through Part A, Part B, and Part C. Now we're going to talk a little bit about what I know many people are currently focused on right now, which is what's happening next Monday, and that is the ability to start applying for the Katie Beckett program. First of all, you can apply for Medicaid at any time. However, you can start applying for Katie Beckett at 7 a.m. Central Time on November 23rd, 2020. So at 7 a.m. Central Time next Monday is when you will be able to start applying for the Katie Beckett program. Applying for the Katie Beckett program starts by applying for Medicaid. TennCare must make sure the child doesn't qualify for Medicaid any other way. So if a child can be Medicaid eligible by another method, then they would not get the Katie Beckett program. They would get Medicaid through that other option. This is the only way to apply for Katie Beckett. Starting on November 23rd, when you apply for Medicaid, you can also choose to apply for Katie Beckett. And to apply for Medicaid and Katie Beckett, you will need to create an account on TennCare Connect. There's a link right there to the TennCare Connect website, and you can go ahead and create that account right now. Important to note that you can create an account on a computer or a smartphone. However, you can only apply for Medicaid and Katie Beckett from your computer and not your smartphone. So in order to apply for Medicaid and Katie Beckett, you will need a computer with internet access to be able to do that. If you do not have a computer, DIDD can help you apply. The application to apply for Katie Beckett is written at a 6th grade reading level. And there's also some help language in the application. Sometimes it's on the screen and sometimes there's a question mark that will bring up that help language. Also, we had gotten some inquiries about how to apply through our regional Katie Beckett offices. And one of the things that we have done is created a video to help apply right there. There's an instructional video on the TennCare site, and you can see that link right there. When you are filling out that application, just to give you an idea of some of the things you'll be looking at, to apply for this, you're going to need to answer questions about people in your home who are applying, the people who live with you, the money you get, and the things you pay for and own. And you're going to need to tell us as much as you can, because this will help speed up the process so you can get a decision faster. Also, this application takes some time to fill out, so you should give yourself some time to fill it out. It usually takes about 30 to 60 minutes to fill it out. If TennCare doesn't have everything they need, they may send a letter asking for papers to complete your financial review. And be sure to give us those papers and those things that they ask for by the date in the letter, and you can upload those documents from your computer. To apply for Medicaid and Katie Beckett, you will also need to tell us things like your current address, phone number, and email address if you have one, Social Security numbers and dates of birth for everyone applying, money from jobs and other sources, citizenship and immigration status, the value of cars and other properties, and other health insurance information. So that is when you are filling out the self-referral process. Once you send that, once you are done and you send that, and you apply for Katie Beckett and the Medicaid program, a DIDD case manager will contact you to set up a time for an assessment. When that case manager calls, they will tell you what papers you should have ready. DIDD will complete the assessment. They'll collect the financial and medical records and papers to see if your child qualifies for Katie Beckett. And it is very important to have these documents ready, because we can't move forward and see if your child qualifies without papers that prove your child's conditions and needs. This is not a we can take your word for it situation. We do need the documentation to support the child's condition and needs. And as soon as we can get that information, that will help us move forward in the next steps. Just an idea of some of the things that you might need: medical records that show your child's conditions and medical needs, IQ evaluation with diagnosis of intellectual disability, school records, therapy notes, and assessments. And I want to say that this is not the entire or an inclusive list of everything, but these are some ideas of the things that will let us know whether or not your child meets the level of care for Part A or Part B. When that assessment process is going on, DIDD is first going to look to see if the child meets the medical rules for Part B. So we'll first start with that at-risk level of care. Then, if the child also meets the medical rules for Part A separate review will be done by a third party. And this will include a review by a doctor. So folks that will be reviewed for Part A will have it done by a third party with a doctor included in that review. DIDD will tell you if they think your child may meet Part A level of care. And if a DIDD case manager does not think you meet Part A level of care and you disagree, you can request a Part A review. No matter what, we will hold a Part B slot for your child if one is open through the Part A assessment. So if you think your child will meet Part A, or DIDD thinks your child meets Part A, that Part B slot, if available, will be held while that assessment is completed. You will get a letter that tells you if you qualify and for which part you qualify. And if you don't qualify for either Part A or Part B, the letter will tell you why and tell you how to appeal if you think we made a mistake. So now we're on next steps. First of all, when we talk about timeline, DIDD and TennCare expect a very high volume of referrals on the first day of the program and the first few days of the program. Just right now, we have 262 people on this call. And so we do expect many, many people to apply in those first days. We will work as hard as we can to schedule and finish assessments for as many people who come. We will ask patience though, and I understand that many families have already been very, very patient and anxiously awaiting this program. to come to fruition for the past several months and really over a year since it passed. So we are going to work as hard as we can to get through those assessments and schedule those assessments and get people in the door for this program. One thing I always like to talk about is ways that people can receive updates about this program and how they can connect with us to learn more. First of all, we are always posting program updates on several pages. First of all, DIDD and TennCare both have Katie Beckett pages, and you'll see the links there. And at this point in time, I would say that we are posting updates to those pages pretty much once or twice a day sometimes. So those are the areas where you're going to see a lot of those resources. And when I'm finished, I'll actually go show you some of the things that are already on there. Also, you can subscribe to DIDD's weekly newsletter, Open Line, and you can contact Carly Carlton to do that. And that is our weekly newsletter that goes out on Friday and is inclusive of all DIDD related information. Finally, I would absolutely encourage you, if you're on social media, to follow DIDD and TennCare on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We are posting animations, we are posting videos, we are posting resources, and we're doing a lot of it about Katie Beckett right now as we get ready to ramp up for implementation and to help people apply starting on Monday. So with that, I will actually stop sharing this screen, but I am going to go try to share really quickly my web browser so I can kind of toggle over to. So this is the DIDD webpage. If you go to the Katie Beckett waiver right there, this will bring you to the program. Couple of things that I'll show you that are on this program. First of all, there's a little bit of information about the program. Also, right over here under additional resources, we have an updated program information sheet. If you were on the interest list, this is the notification letter. This is the notification letter that we sent out. There's a documentation checklist. This is the very comprehensive level of care guide. The level of care guide for families is that slideshow I pulled up a little while ago that breaks it down. We'll have, this is an old stakeholder presentation, but this presentation will also be on there. This is the full Amendment 40 thing. So if you want to see the Amendment 40, which is what established the Katie Beckett program, this is on there. I saw, as I was reading through some questions about how this whole premium thing is going to work. So I do want to pull this up very quickly. Understanding Katie Beckett's cost sharing. So some of those things where people were asking questions about well, how is this going to work? You can kind of see a couple of examples of the Understanding Katie Beckett cost sharing here. If this will cooperate and let me up. So here's a scenario here. So it will explain exactly how the cost sharing would work and how the premium, the insurance and household income would be deducted. There's a scenario 2 here, and there's also a scenario 3. So if you have more questions about how that might work, you can find this as well. Okay, a couple of things. I saw it flash up on my chat box about the slides. We are going to send, first of all, this presentation has been recorded. We will put this up as soon as we can for people who were not able to make this presentation today. We want to make sure that we are offering this as a resource. Also, we are going to send this slideshow as well as the level of care slides to those who are on our interest list. So if you are on the DIDD Katie Beckett interest list, you will get an email from your regional Katie Beckett office tomorrow with some of this information as well. So now I'm going to go back up to the beginning and see whether or not we've got about 20 minutes for questions and see whether or not we've got some questions. The first is, I have created my account on TennCare Connect. Do I need to go ahead and apply for coverage prior to the self-referral going live on 11/23? I'm going to turn this over to Patty Killingsworth. Patty? Patty, you are on mute.
Okay, I've now unmuted myself in 3 different ways. Does it work this time?
Yes, we got you.
Great. Okay, I've gotten all 3 ways. So I replied to this in the chat. As a practical matter, right, you can apply for Medicaid at any time. And I never want to say, don't apply for Medicaid. You can apply at any time. It's really important to understand, though, that until the new program is implemented in the system, you can't apply for Katie Beckett. So in order to apply for Katie Beckett, you need to log on or after the 23rd. We're going to open that portal at 7 a.m. in the morning, so nobody has to sit up all night waiting for it to open. It'll open at 7 a.m., and that's the first time that you can actually apply for Katie Beckett.
Thank you very much, Patty. Patty, I'm going to ask you to stay here right now. Can anyone explain how the child's portion of private insurance is calculated? As I already showed that slide, but do you have any insight into the actual calculation for private insurance?
Sure. And I popped this. I'm trying to pop things into the chat so you're seeing it in writing. I haven't gotten to everything. But as it relates to how do we calculate the child's portion, we're using a really simple method where we take the total premium for insurance and we divide that by the number of family members who are covered under that premium. As a practical matter, we recognize that that probably overstates what is actually the child's portion of cost. If you typically purchase insurance, you know that adults are much more expensive to cover than kids. So adding kids isn't usually an equal part of the premium, but we think that's an easy way for families to understand, and it certainly favors families' interests. So that's the way that we'll be doing that calculation.
All right, thank you, Patty. When should we expect the coverage after the assessment? I'm going to actually, before I get to you, Patty, I'm going to see whether or not Timothy has anything he wants to add about the assessment process and what that's going to look like from the DIDD side.
Thank you, Kara. It just depends on kind of what we're talking about here. If we're talking about an initial assessment from DIDD, if you complete a referral, we will contact you within 5 business days to set up an assessment with you, which would take place normally within 10 business days. However, due to COVID, we're going to probably assess you at the time we first make contact with you, so you may not have that second 5-day delay in actually the assessment process. Once that assessment occurs, we have around 30 days to make sure that either you meet criteria for Part B or you don't meet criteria for Part B. After that 30 days, you'll get a decision. Should you not qualify for Part B minimally, you can appeal that denial. You can move forward. If you think you may qualify for Part A, but our assessment doesn't lead us to believe that, you can ask for that regardless, and we will certainly honor that request as indicated.
I see several questions also about people wondering if they should go, and I think we've addressed this, but people wanting to know whether they should go ahead and apply for Medicaid ahead of the 23rd. So just to kind of reiterate, Patty, also, first of all, if you want to talk about the assessment, but also maybe reiterate the application process and the Medicaid portion of it as well.
Sure. So first of all, with respect to applying for Medicaid, again, you can apply for Medicaid at any time. So if you want to do that, you can do that today. You cannot apply for Katie Beckett until starting on November 23rd at 7 a.m. Central Time. So that's the first time you can actually go in and apply for Katie Beckett. As it relates to when does eligibility or coverage actually begin, it really depends on the assessment process and how quickly we can get all of the information that we need to make a decision. For a child who is only going to qualify for Part B, that's only a one step, if you will, a shorter assessment process. If a child might qualify for Part A, there's another assessment that comes after that Part B assessment. And so more medical information is needed, another level of review is needed. So that will take a little bit more time. We're certainly going to move all of those processes as quickly as we can. As Kara pointed out in the slide deck, having all of your information ready and available. So on the financial application, submitting that through TennCare Connect, making that information available for that financial eligibility determination as it relates to the Part B assessment, making sure that DIDD has everything that they need to make that first assessment determination will help move things along.
Thanks, Patty. Stay on. How will the application work for children who are currently on Cover Kids?
It'll work exactly as it does for any other child who doesn't qualify for Medicaid. Technically speaking, Cover Kids is not Medicaid eligibility. It is a different type of coverage. So we will accept those Medicaid applications and process them as we would for any other child.
The next question is, how do we get on the interest list, please? If you go to the DIDD website, there are numbers for the TennCare or the DIDD regional offices in your region. If you call them, they can add you to the Katie Beckett interest list, and those numbers are available on the DIDD website. Okay. Are the Katie Beckett and Medicaid applications the same? And if I wait until Monday to apply for both, will it take longer? Patty.
So the Medicaid application for both is the same, right? Because as a practical matter, what you have to do to qualify for Katie Beckett is be determined not to qualify for Medicaid. So it starts with a Medicaid application. And then once that application has been processed and we determine that you don't qualify in any other category, then we move on to the Katie Beckett determination if you have completed the Katie Beckett portion of that application in the portal. So it literally gives you a chance as you're going through that Medicaid application to refer yourself for Katie Beckett so that that also triggers the start of the Katie Beckett referral process. I think as long as you have your information ready to complete your application, my strong recommendation would be if you're applying for Katie Beckett, again, wait until the portal is open because that is the first time that you can apply for Katie Beckett. That doesn't mean that you can't file a Medicaid application now. You still have to go back and file an application for Katie Beckett when the portal for Katie Beckett opens.
Okay, thank you very much, Patty. I have 5 special needs children. How should I handle the application with multiple children? Patty?
Man, am I wishing there was somebody from the eligibility team on this call.
I know. I was just thinking that we should have invited somebody with TennCare Connect to come help us here.
Thankfully, I have Christina who is informing me on some things as I go. So the great thing about the Medicaid application is that you identify everybody who lives in the household for whom you are applying. So you can fill out one Medicaid application. You'll list all of those children who live in the household on that application, and you will indicate then that you are applying for Katie Beckett on behalf of however many of them you're applying for Katie Beckett for, and you don't have to do that 5 different times. And if I got that wrong, Christina's going to text me immediately and tell me so that I can clarify that.
All right, does a tablet or laptop count as a computer to apply?
Bo, do you know the answer to that? I think that a laptop will. I'm not as certain about a tablet.
Right. And so Jordan and I were talking about this earlier today, and it was, it depends on the operating system, on the type of tablet you probably have and the compatibility, because I think the TennCare Connect website really doesn't do well in terms of compatibility with iOS or Android operations. And so we really strongly encourage you to use a laptop or a desktop just to make sure.
I believe Commissioner Turner actually had a comment he wanted to make as well. Commissioner?
Yeah, thanks, Kara. Just real quick. So along those lines, one of the things that I'm working on and will continue to be pushing is trying to figure out the ease of accessibility around a mobile app. So we've got the My Tennessee, MyTN application that's available on the mobile platforms. The Katie Beckett waiver and part of these processes is something that we've been working on and starting to have conversations around how do we make it easier for families that might not have a laptop or only access to a computer at work, but we're working on that to make sure that it's as easy for you to be able to apply or to submit documents and information as physically possible, because the last thing we want to do is make it harder on you as parents submitting those information, submitting screenshots, scanning in documents. So I don't have an answer for that yet, but understand that we're moving forward with trying to make sure that it's easier for you to apply through online applications like MyTN in the future. Thanks, Kara.
Thanks, Commissioner. Will Katie Beckett pick up bills of this year or any past bills? Patty?
Katie Beckett will be effective no earlier for Katie Beckett Part A. The effective date, Christina, I may need your help here. I know it is no earlier than the date of application. It may not, however, be until that first premium is paid, and so that's what I need Christina to clarify for me, and I'll let you know here in just a second. But it will not go back and pick up bills prior to that. It is the date of the premium payment. So the date that you pay your first month's premium is the date that eligibility can then begin, and it will not be retroactive.
Patty. And because we have a lot of questions, I see some, and I'm just going to refer you all to certain areas rather than so we can get to some of the other questions. When it comes to more details of what constitutes the highest need of level of care, in those documents we've referenced, you will be able to find all of that information. It is very, very, very detailed and can all be found now on the DIDD and TennCare Katie Beckett websites. So I will refer you over there. How many spots will be available for Part A? It is up to 300 slots. For Part B, it is up to 2,700 slots. So just reiterating that. That is also in the presentation as well, so you all can revisit that information. Medical records. Can we be more specific? We talked a lot about this because many people have years and years and years of medical records. Patty or Bo, do you want to? I mean, we are going to we're going to try to get some more guidance on that out over the course of the next few days. But Patty or Bo, do you want to touch on this a little before I just move off this question?
I think it's a great question, right? And I know I remember having literally boxes of medical records for my son. So what we really need is recent medical records which best document the child's medical conditions, medical needs, intellectual disability, if that's applicable, functional needs as well, right? The things that eligibility is really based on is what we will need. I think DIDD in particular will be looking for that proof of intellectual disability where that's applicable for an eligibility determination. On the medical side, we are really looking for that recent documentation that supports the child's medical condition and medical needs. Bo, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I would add that there's, in terms of the LOC, the level of care document, there's some requirements that the condition exists for a certain period of time. So we want really to make sure that your documentation covers that period of time. And so we really want to look back probably within a year to see what's going on and see what the diagnostic material is and related information. So Patty, you're exactly right. We don't need boxes and boxes of information. What we need is probably current within a year information around the diagnosis and or intellectual disability, developmental disability.
And remember, for Part A, we have to have that medical certification. So the physician has to certify that the level of care information is accurate, that the child qualifies for institutional level of care and can be safely served at home.
Thank you both. If we have already applied for Medicaid in the past and have been denied, do we have to apply again? Patty?
Yes. Yes.
Short answer, great. Do you have the documents available? Do you have to have the documents available to prove income and medical diagnosis when applying next Monday? Patty?
You do not have to have them available when you apply. I will say again that the more information you can have available when you apply, the faster we can probably process an application. So particularly from a financial perspective, if you don't submit all of the information, then you will get a letter telling you what is needed. We won't be able to process that application until we get that information from you. So it's really important to watch for those letters and respond to them timely. On the medical side, having that information available for DIDD when that first assessment is completed. And then if you are referred for Part A, also having that information available that may be needed for your medical assessment there will just help those processes move more quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody asked for clarification, 30 days after initial assessment to make Part B decision and 30 days after second level of assessment for Part A decision. Bo, would you like to add any clarification or just a yes, no, or anything?
Yeah, I mean, generally speaking, the Part B assessment can take up to 30 days because as Patty indicated, if we do the assessment and you guys and your parent, you don't have the documentation handy, we're going to have to kind of wait on that up to 27 more days after that to make sure that you do have the documentation that supports at minimum Part B level of care. And so, yes, that's 30 days. Above and beyond that, if in fact you're referred for Part A assessment or you want Part A assessment, then that's conducted by Ascend Management, which is one of our contracts, which will actually do that assessment piece. That can take probably 30 more days at least, I believe 30 days. And Patty and Christina, you guys can correct that if you need to.
Okay, we've got 3 minutes, and I still see a lot of questions, but I see a couple of them that are questions that a couple of people really want to ask. So I'm going to try to get to those with the time we have left. Do wraparound services run on a fiscal year or calendar year? Bo, can you answer this question?
Yeah. So essentially right now in our current waiver programs, we have what's called an ISP year and a calendar year. And so while technically Part B will run on a calendar year, we will be operating in terms of service requests on an ISP year, or it's called an individual support plan year. So that's really nothing you need to worry about specifically right now. It's just a point that we have to deal with, and it's really our responsibility to make sure that we do it that way.
Question that we got a bunch of. Is this program only approved for a year? Will we have to apply each year? And if we get coverage for 1 year, could we not get a slot for years to come? Patty, would you like to kind of answer how application and eligibility continues on this program?
Sure, it'll work just like it works for other Medicaid programs. It is not approved just for a year. It is a part of our broader TennCare program. And so you will have to have eligibility redetermined every year to make sure that you still qualify for the program, but it won't be a new application process. It will be just a review process. Again, I will say,
Thanks.
as it is for all Medicaid, though, be sure you complete that redetermination process, right? You don't want to fall off and then run the risk that there might not be a spot available for you. So please be diligent about watching for that information and completing that process.
Absolutely, that's very important. Finally, and we've gotten this question a couple of times, does an IEP count as documentation of functional or behavioral needs? Patty or Bo, either of you have insight on this?
Yeah, I'll go ahead, Patty. Yeah, absolutely, an IEP can support that assessment need, that documentation piece that shows the child has significant challenges in whatever area we're looking at. So yes, we will accept that documentation in terms of supporting that level of care determination.
I would only add to that, though, that it may or may not be sufficient in and of itself, right? So it
Right.
absolutely may provide very relevant information. It may not be sufficient by itself.
Absolutely.
Depending on how comprehensive it is. Yeah.
Right.
All right. Thank you all very much. It is 4 o'clock, so in the interest of time, we are going to call it a day. However, this recording will be on as soon as we can get it on. So we will work to get this recording available on the DIDD website. We will send out those materials to those interest lists. And also, this we will work to get some more resources up, particularly around some of the application stuff, since I see there are many, many questions. And while we might not be able to answer all of those questions, we want to do what we can to make sure you all feel confident and equipped going into Monday. I would like to thank Commissioner Turner, Patty, and Timothy for their participation today. We really hope you found this helpful. We want to be good partners with you, and we want to be available to provide you with information and help you all navigate this new program. We're excited to get to this point, and we're looking forward to what the future holds for all of you. So thank you very much. We hope you were able to find this useful, and we look forward to having conversations with you all in the future. Have a great evening.